Yes, ma'am, you can go.
Yeah. Shall I begin?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. On behalf of all of us at St. Xavier's College, Mumbai, a very good afternoon to one and all, and a warm welcome. I welcome all the dignitaries, speakers, participants, and faculty present here for the 6-day faculty development program on reigniting the research spark, exploring new methodologies and perspectives. Just to introduce myself, I am Dr. Karuna Gokarn, Vice Principal Academics and Convener of this program. Good research practices and values underlying research integrity can create a culture of quality research in academia. This not only raises the benchmark of research performance and enhances the repute of individuals, but also of institutions and the country. With the evolving trends in qualitative and quantitative research designs, we need to open our minds to the complexities of variables and issues with divergent methodologies and varying levels of analysis. As we collaborate across disciplines, institutes, and countries, this program hopes to kindle interest in us and equip us with tools and techniques for finding solutions to research problems as we interact with a range of eminent experts in the fields. With these few words, I would now like to invite our rector, Dr. Father Keith D'Souza, to lead us through a short prayer and bless this program.
Thank you, Karuna. And at the start, I wish all of you who put this together all the best. And I formulated my prayer in the form of a PowerPoint. So I'd like to share my screen. So let's begin with this prayer, this invocation, praying for the Lord's grace and blessing over this very important and significant theme of reigniting the research spark. Lord God, whom we call by different names, we bow before you as we begin our program. We ask for the following graces. First of all, enable us, Lord, to enhance the value of professional innovation. Grant us the grace to be creative in our research, to ask critical questions, never to be afraid to ask questions, and to seek to make things better. Not just to look at the past and to see how things were done, but how we can make things better. Secondly, dear Lord, enable us to enhance the value of personal integration. Grant us the grace to always seek for and to do what is good, and to do what is right, to do what is just, to do what is true. Grant us the grace to become peaceful and happy persons as we go about our research and our studies and our work. And above all, grant us the grace to enjoy thoroughly our work, our intellectual labor and our research. Let it not be something heavy, but something light and beautiful. And finally, with respect to our value of social inclusion, we pray that we be enabled to enhance the value of social inclusion. We in our country who are so blessed with such a diversity of religions, of cultures, of languages, of cuisine, of ways of approaching life, that we include all of this as part of our research. Grant us the grace to contribute our talents so that others may benefit from our labor. Let our work be an offering of love. Secondly, grant us the grace to collaborate with others beyond our numerous borders and social boundaries. Our state borders, our national borders, our cultural borders, our religious borders and boundaries, so that we can collaborate with people in our country and across the world. and to make the fruits of our intellectual work accessible and affordable to all, so that our research, the fruits of our research, is not only reaped by a few privileged people, but as far as possible, those fruits be reaped by a wider audience, by wider members of our human family. The fruits of our work accessible and affordable to all. And we make all of these prayers for our students, for our colleagues, for our institutions, for our beloved country, for our entire human family. And we offer all these prayers and humble petition, seeking to do your will above all and to work for the common good. Amen.
Thank you, Father Keith, for giving us such a beautiful lead into the program. Thank you for giving us the food for thought and all the values you have just mentioned. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Karuna.
I would now request our principal, Dr. Rajendra Shinde, to welcome our chief guest, Dr. Pankajkumar, and address the gathering.
Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our chief guest, Dr. Pankajkumar, State Project Director, RUSA Maharashtra, other dignitaries from RUSA who are attending this program, all the faculty, researchers, and student participants from various institutions across the country for this RUSA-sponsored one-week faculty development program, Reigniting the Research Spark, exploring the methodologies and perspectives on a virtual platform organized by the IQAC of St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. Also, I would like to welcome all the eminent speakers and guests from different places, from different walks of life, who have agreed to guide us through this 6-day FDP. We have received an overwhelming response from faculty and students interested in research. We have crossed 1,200 registrations for both science, arts, and commerce. The St. Xavier's College is an autonomous institution since 2010, affiliated to the University of Mumbai from its very establishment in 1869. So thus completing the 152 years in January 2021. We have been NAC re-accredited 3 times, and all 3 times we have scored top grades. Last 4 years, we were the only college from Mumbai to secure a place in the list of top 100 colleges of the National Institutional Ranking Framework. Twice, we have been awarded the College of Potential of Excellence Award by UGC and College of Excellence Award in 2014 again by UGC. The Best College of University of Mumbai, DST FIST, DBT Star Status are just a few accolades to mention here. Our contribution in education and research is not just recognized and acknowledged by RUSA Maharashtra, but also by the Department of Biotechnology, Delhi. Very recently, we were awarded a DBT Builder grant of 3 crores for our interdisciplinary postgraduate research. I'm happy to mention here that under the RUSA sponsored program, we have recently initiated a new research center in the agricultural sector. We have been promoting research through project-based education. We inculcate the research culture at the undergraduate level through curricular and co-curricular activities, such as our college-initiated honors program to equip students into basic aspects of research and prepare them to fly higher. The Explore, Xavier's research journal, started in 2010 to promote our faculty research, has been listed in the UGC Care journals due to the quality publications. Some departments also publish articles in their departmental research journals, which is the outcome of the teacher-guided research projects done by students. I'm happy to put on the record here that our placement cell has successfully placed over 101 students even in the COVID-affected academic year. The highest package offered to one of our students was 30 lakhs per annum. Under the aegis of RUSA, we have also got active e-cell that is engaged in guiding, encouraging, and training students to help develop their innovative ideas into a startup ventures. Xavier's is known for its core values: innovation, integration, and inclusion. We believe in service to poor. We are also known for our social involvement program, specially designed and structured to sensitize our students towards their social responsibilities, and every student dedicates a minimum of 50 hours of compulsory social involvement program. Through the various programs, seminars, and lectures, our students are also made aware of various other social and global issues. We just don't preach, but also practice. During the lockdown period, our college was used as a COVID center. Our management and students provided food packets, medical kits, and groceries to the migrant workers and COVID frontline workers on the duties. I take this opportunity to thank our chief guest, Dr. Pankajkumar, and his RUSA team for their wholehearted cooperation, support, guidance, and encouragement to our college and our RUSA team from time to time. I wish all the participants successful and fruitful learning in their future endeavors.
I think there is some internet issue. Brother Vivian, you're there?
Yes, ma'am.
Question has concluded.
Raju sir's internet has given me.
Yeah. Dr. Shinde, we could not hear your last line, I think.
Well, I just thanked everyone. I'm thanking again. Thank you, Dr. Pankaj Kumar and the RUSA team for your wholehearted support, guidance, and encouragement to my college, to our college, and our RUSA team at college. Thank you very much. And I hope and pray that all the participants will enhance their skills through this 6 days faculty development program. Thank you, Karuna. That's what I said.
Thank you, Dr. Shinde, for your highly encouraging words, putting on record our academic excellence and social involvement. I would now call upon our Vice Principal Arts and RUSA Nodal Officer, Dr. Annapurna Shankar Narayanan, to introduce our Honorable Chief Guest, Dr. Pankajkumar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karuna. Good afternoon and a warm welcome to all the participants. It is my privilege today to introduce our esteemed chief guest, Shri Pankajkumar sir, Indian Administrative Services Officer 2002 batch, designated as Secretary to Government of Maharashtra. Currently, he serves as Project Director, Rashtriya Uchchatar Shiksha Abhiyan, also known as RUSA, Department of Higher and Technical Education, Maharashtra. Sir also holds additional charges of Development Commissioner for the Unorganized Worker, Maharashtra. He is the Executive Director, Maharashtra State Faculty Development Academy. Sir has previously held a variety of important posts. Naming a few, he was Commissioner, Sports and Youth Services, Maharashtra State, Pune, Member Secretary, Marathwada Statutory Development Board, Aurangabad. He was the collector in Beed. Sir also served as Deputy Secretary, Labour Mantralaya, CEO, Zilla Parishad in Beed, Jalgaon and Chandrapur, and SDO, Deori, Umred and Khemgaon. Sir, with due respect, I thank you for gracing this occasion, and I now invite you to address this academic gathering and share your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Annapurna ji, for your kind words. Dr. Rajendra Shinde, the principal of the St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. Dr. Karuna Gokarn, the vice principal academics. The other speakers for the today's sessions, Dr. Bimal Roy, Sri Vishal Gupta, Ms. Puthia Puril Sneha, IQAC coordinators, other faculty members of the college, ladies and gentlemen who are attending the 6-day online FDP on reigniting the research, exploring new methodologies and perspectives. Let me begin with thanking all the organizers for providing me an opportunity to interact with the teachers, the faculty members, the PG students, and the research scholars from all across the country. I'm told that this FDP has about 1,300 participants, which is indeed a large number. But I'm hopeful the learnings from this program will get propagated further to a wider research-oriented faculty members and students. I would start with a brief regarding RUSA. RUSA is a centrally sponsored scheme of the Government of India, in which the fund sharing is 60% with Government of India and 40% with the Government of Maharashtra. Under RUSA, we have funded about 100 projects in the state. Our efforts in the past couple of years have borne fruit, and as of now, about 40% of the institutions in Maharashtra are NAAC accredited. We have 112 autonomous institutions, which is the number is highest in the country. All our institutions to which we provide the funds, they have undertaken the reforms such as the CBCS, the semester system, and of course, RUSA has also developed the futuristic courses which have been implemented all across our beneficiaries. I think this program is being organized at the right juncture, as the Government of India has recently come up with the new education policy, which focuses on the research. And in line with that, our Honorable Finance Minister, Government of India, has recently announced that an outlay of rupees 50,000 crores for the National Research Foundation for the next 5 years. As you are aware that the research is currently funded by the institutions like the Department of Science and Technology, the Department of Atomic Energy, the Department of Biotechnology, ICAR, ICMR, UGC, etc. It will continue, but NRF is over and above, but the efforts will be made so that there is no duplication anywhere. Now, to just give you a brief background regarding the situation in the other countries. The United States of America, you know, it's the world leader and the most prolific publisher of the high quality science journals. The total articles which are published by the US, they surpass every other nation. You will note that most of the dominant countries, they spend the highest on the R&D activities. The United States, it spends almost 2.8% of its GDP. Japan 3.4%. The small countries like South Korea, Israel, and Taiwan, they spend close to 4% of the GDPs. If you really want to compare ourselves with our neighbor, China spends about 2%, whereas in India, the spending on research is 0.7%. And among these countries, South Korea is the world's most science-educated country, with 32% of its degrees awarded in the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And in fact, they are striving to win another Nobel Prize. The earlier one they won was in the field of peace. Another dimension is the latitude that we need to cover. There is an estimate from the UNESCO which says that the number of researchers in R&D per million population in India is about 253, and the equivalent figures in the other developed in the other nations is about 4,000 to 7,000. So you see the gap which we all need to cover. But where is this research coming from? It is coming from the top performing universities. To name a few: Harvard, Stanford, MIT, etc. In USA, most of the focus is on the life sciences, which is about 50% of the nation's output in the natural sciences, followed by the chemistry, physical sciences, and earth and environmental sciences. Germany, another of the developed nations, it has more than 270 collaborative research centers, which are funded by the German Research Foundation, and for a period up to 12 years, which allows the researchers to commit themselves to complex, long-term, multidisciplinary projects across the universities and institutes. In fact, the private sector funding is also largest in the best performing countries. We all are aware why research is important, but I believe it is imperative to teach the younger generation the importance of research. And this inculcation has to begin at the school level itself. I think there is a need for definitive shift in the school education towards the play and discovery method of learning, with the emphasis on the scientific method and the critical thinking. I think recently the government of Delhi has announced that they're planning to set up their own education board. So there is a need to think that if we can change the way we assess a child, unless and until we change the way we assess a child, it will remain very difficult what we teach to the child. So there is a need to give our children an education that makes them good, socially responsible citizens and not just cogs in a machine. Similarly, the inclusion of research and internship in the undergraduate curriculum is also important. It will also help them to understand the issues and increase the public awareness. They will also gain hands-on experience in completing a research project. They would earn the academic credit, scholarship, stipends, and other awards for having conducted their research. They'll also learn other valuable life skills such as professionalism, time management, and learning how to use the online research tools. So we should strike together and come up with the concrete proposals related to the issues which are being faced by the society. To name a few: climate change, population dynamics and management, biotechnology, expanding digital marketplace, rise of robotics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. But let's see what is actually happening. It may not be true for everyone, but it seems to be happening. What do we do when we do a research? First, we scan through the latest published research which has already been published, and we find out the hot topics which are, our peers in the other countries are working on. Then we filter out the ones which are beyond our capacity, and then we pick up something which we feel comfortable with and find out how much juice has already been extracted of the topic, and then try to squeeze out the last drop. So I would say to present in a conference or publish an article for promotion is not research. It is just pretending to do the research. So first point is the mindset. The mindset is very important. You all are aware that scientific progress is neither an economic activity nor a political activity. It's a cultural thing. And the most fabulous research, it emerges from those nations who spend a significant fraction of their budgets on health and education. So this reveals their priorities and in turn reflects the social culture. Second issue is that, is the research really valued by the society? It seems it may be valued in the developed countries like USA or UK, but is it valued so in India? We are very sensitive to others, to what others think of us, and we tend to think in relative terms. So a job in an IT company may be more respected, and you all are aware that in some countries a teacher's job is the most highly paid job. And then of course there is a jugaad mentality in which we try to do the quick fix types of solutions. And in fact, over the last few years, we have seen that the innovation which has taken place is mostly in the service sector, in which we repackage an old idea and sell it as new in a digitally oriented way. So, one more example is the 5G. Everybody wants that 5G services should be rolled out now, right now. But how many of us are working towards building the core of that 5G or 6G technology? And of course, there are other systemic issues also. The research methods and the statistic support are not considered as a basic infrastructure in any institute. I don't know if there is any university which has a statistical support unit of say 20 statisticians which are working in that university. So there is also a need to thoroughly understand the process, what research means and how we can aid it. A single individual may not be able to do everything himself or herself. Another thing which comes to my mind is how we are treating the PhD students. What are the mechanisms which we have put in place to facilitate them? It is also seen that the doctoral students are not given working place at the university. In the absence of office space, the students, they prefer to stay at home instead of coming to the university. So work from home might be a new phenomena for others, but not for our PhD students. And working through the guides chamber or a library is not the ideal solution. And it is also seen that the students who are enrolled in the PhD program in other universities, they're expected to work as research or teaching assistants. But here in India, it is seen that they may not always be allowed to formally teach in all the universities. So what do we do? Well, this thing is going to be covered in by all these speakers in the next 6 days, but there are certain things which I would like to highlight. The faculty member who wishes to undertake the research needs to be self-motivated, which is very important. There may be hundreds of problems which you may be surrounded with, but you need to be clear-headed as to what you wish to achieve. The administrators of the institutions should provide the enabling research environment in their institute. The peer network should also be tapped for innovative ideas and research-oriented detailed discussions. The themes and the topics, they should be chosen based on what the society needs. The society may be your immediate neighborhood, your district, your state, or your country. And since research is not an overnight activity, one needs to remain focused, overcoming the failures, if any, and prepare for the long haul. Intrinsic expertise should also be developed, that is, writing of the research papers, writing the proposal for obtaining grants, new research methodologies, etc. And I'm sure this FTB would reignite the research spark in each one of you. So thank you so much and best wishes to everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your inspiring talk, for sharing your thoughts and need to instill research culture from the very basics of education in India. You also highlighted the importance of research, where the researchers need to remain motivated and perhaps collaborate to overcome all the hurdles. Thank you so much, sir. Now it is my honor to offer a vote of thanks on behalf of St. Xavier's College. To begin with, Dr. Pankajkumar for gracing this occasion despite your busy schedule. A gratitude to Rashtriya Uchchatar Shiksha Abhiyan for funding this FDP. We are fortunate to host our research enthusiasts all on YouTube right now, our dear participants, for joining this program. My gratitude to Dr. Shinde and the management for their constant support and encouragement. Thanks to my organizing committee, faculty and students for their collaboration and cooperation in launching this endeavor. And lastly, thank you God for everything. Just before we break out into the sessions, I would like to reiterate the housekeeping instructions that I have already posted on the 2 Google Classrooms. I request each participant to read them and adhere to them, especially if we want to benefit from interactions through question and answer and not through greeting messages. Thank you. One more important point is the feedback form link, which is your attendance also for the day, will be posted on YouTube, and the form will be accessible only for 30 minutes after the sessions every day. I would now request the science participants to log into the other YouTube link, and after that session, which is Mr. Vishal Gupta's session, you will come back to this link for Dr. Bimal Roy's talk. The second session is a common talk for arts and science. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karuna. Thanks a lot. That was a wonderful beginning.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we have a successful seminar ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, so I should join the other link, right?
Yes. Mr. Vishal Gupta, I think you will also have to
Yeah,
the other link.
yeah, ma'am. I'm just leaving this and
Thanks
joining.
for joining us for the inauguration.
It was wonderful, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Father Keith.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Hi, Sneha.
All the best for the rest of the days.
Thank you. Hello, Sneha. I'll just say hello to her. I just saw her here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes. Hi.
Hi, hello, ma'am. My apologies, my camera is not working, but yeah.
Not a problem.
So I think, Dr. Karuna, we will wait for half a minute so that everybody can join the science, and then we will begin our session.
I will see you later.
Yes, ma'am. So I think it's 3:54. We will begin our session.
Yeah, so in another 1 or 2 minutes, I think we should begin.
Yes.
I mean, we were all proper on time, like, for this. Finished our inauguration. Thanks.
All right. I think we can begin our session now. Am I audible? Right. Thank you, everyone. A very good afternoon to all our esteemed participants from different universities and colleges from across the country. We welcome you to the 6-day faculty development program, Reigniting the Research Spark, Exploring New Methodologies and Perspectives. The quest for knowledge and finding solutions to pertinent issues faced by not just businesses, but common man through an in-depth understanding of the entire process of accurate research methodologies is what puts the innovators and pathfinders on a different platform altogether. But how can we reinstill the spirit of research and knowledge generation amongst the faculty and students? To guide us through this quest for knowledge, we have with us Ms. Sneha, our distinguished speaker for the first session of our faculty development program. It's my honor and privilege to introduce our resource person for the day. Ms. Sneha is a researcher with the Center for Internet and Society, CIS, Bangalore. She has graduated in psychology and English from the prestigious Mount Carmel College in Bangalore and has done her post-graduation in English from St. Joseph's College of Arts and Science in Bangalore. Her work at CIS includes research, ideation, planning and program development as a part of the Researchers at Work and Access to Knowledge program at CIS. Her areas of interest include methodological concerns in arts and humanities, digital media and culture, higher education, pedagogy, and access to knowledge. She has an illustrious list of publications in national and international journals to her credit. Her recent work includes writing on the digital turn in archival practices in India, and exploratory research and collaborative work on mapping digital language practices, and her efforts to create a multilingual internet is indeed noteworthy. Ms. Sneha has also worked for the Higher Education Innovation and Research Applications HEIRA program, Center for Study of Culture and Society, CSCS, Bangalore, where she played a pivotal role in developing proposals for projects on diversity and inclusiveness in education. It is indeed our honor to have you with us, ma'am, and I welcome you to our faculty development program. Over to you, ma'am, and a big welcome to you once again on behalf of the college, the management, the principal, and all the staff. Welcome you. Over to you, ma'am.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that very warm welcome. It's great to be here and great to be part of this program. And I look forward to some great conversations on digital humanities and more, of course, through this entire session. So for my talk today, I will be sharing a set of reflections on work we have done over the last couple of years on mapping this field called digital humanities in India. This is largely based on a report that we published in 2016, but also on some continuing work since then on digital archives and access to knowledge and several sort of related areas. So if it's all right, I'll just take about half a minute to quickly share a set of slides on Zoom. All right, so I hope the slides are visible on the screen.
Yes, it's visible, Sneha. Go ahead.
Yeah, all right. Right, so for the presentation today, I thought I could talk a little bit about, of course, some of the ongoing work around digital humanities in India. What have been sort of early kind of objectives? What are various sort of topics of interest, let's say, in different areas of digital humanities? And of course, coming to the central question that we're all exploring here, which is related to methods and how that is a very pertinent but also very complex question, particularly in a field such as digital humanities. So, right. So before we begin, just a quick introductory note on CIS itself. We're a non-profit organization established in 2008, based in Bengaluru and Delhi. And we undertake interdisciplinary research on internet and digital technologies from policy and academic perspectives. These are just some broad areas of work that we have been working on for the last more than 10 years now. Largely on policy research, but also on academic work related to sort of social processes and structures and how they've changed with the internet and digital media. And we also work very closely with the Indian language Wikimedia communities and the larger open access and free knowledge movement in India. So I think to begin, I mean, I'm taking like really a very traditional approach here by looking at definitions. And my apologies for this sort of wall of text on the slides, but I thought we could focus really on some of the keywords that I've highlighted in this slide. So DH as a field, digital humanities, or DH as we call it, as a field has been around and growing for a couple of decades now. But there is still some uncertainty on what exactly comprises the field, right? So often leading to it being called an emergent field even today. So in some of these definitions, these are some of the very early kind of definitions of DH that came up in literature that has been around, for some time now. And these are called some of the kind of foundational texts of the discipline as they're taught in different universities across the world. So one of the early definitions was by Father Robert Busa, who spoke about DH being, the automation of every possible analysis of human expression. And of course, he meant that in the widest sense of the word, but again, the nucleus remaining the discourse of written text. Right? And this definition is reproduced in a volume by Schreibman and co-authors in 2004. Another very important volume by Anne Burdick and collaborators called Digital Humanities talks about the field as less a unified field than an array of convergent practices that explore a universe in which print is no longer the primary medium in which knowledge is produced and disseminated. So you see the focus and the emphasis on sort of written texts and how that is slowly kind of changing and widening as we go through these definitions. The next is from a series of books on digital humanities. It's called the Debates in Digital Humanities series, brought out by Minnesota Press. And this was really the very first or second volume that came out in 2016. And the editors, Golden Klein, had this sort of definition or description of what all would entail working in DH. So everything from digital archives, quantitative analysis, tool building projects, visualizations of large image sets, 3D modeling of historical artifacts, born digital dissertations, hashtag activism, alternate reality games, mobile maker spaces. So they basically conclude by saying that it's difficult to determine with any specificity what precisely digital humanities work entails. Right? So coming then to how the discourse around this has evolved and how we have been thinking about DH, particularly in sort of what is called, say, global South context or outside of the very focused Anglo-American context in which the field has, or a lot of the discourse of the field has, or mainstream discourse of the field has really evolved. Right, so Rupika Rasim at Salem State University has been a very prominent scholar in this space, particularly in a field now called post-colonial digital humanities. And she talks about, again, what she sees as the important and significant contribution of digital humanities, which is towards developing and sustaining the digital cultural record of humanity. So she also focuses on how this is to be done by, and she says it's by thinking critically about digital methods for humanities research and objects of knowledge, and by building digital archives, maps, databases, and other digital objects. Yeah. Similarly, Nishant Shah, in his work on digital humanities and infrastructure, really looks at what are the sort of possibilities that DH then opens up, right, for in terms of questioning, contesting, and remapping the ways in which conditions of life, labor, and language are rapidly changing the widely varied and uneven advent of digital modernity in the country. So he talks about how DH then can serve a dual function, building relevant and sensitive infrastructure of production and access to knowledge, as well as building a critical voice that resists the dehumanizing principles of network societies. So I think the key word sort of to take away from this is really about criticality and how do you develop a critical lens towards looking at digital infrastructures, but also then looking at how humanities methods change and grow with the advent of these digital technologies. So with that introduction, I think we can move on to some of the sort of key questions that we had in mind when we embarked on that exercise on mapping DH in India. So I think, at least at that time, I think the sort of early questions that we had in mind were really, are digital and humanities really two contradictory terms that are being bridged together? Is this a reiteration of the famous two cultures debate, right, by C.P. Snow? What are changes in the objects of inquiry in humanities disciplines due to the advent of the internet and digital technologies? What methods are to be used to study and work with digital objects? How are these affecting the traditional methods of the humanities? Is DH a fringe academic phenomena, and can it be related to academic disciplines only? So with several groups of practitioners engaging with questions and methods akin to DH outside of universities, how do we define its institutional boundaries? And finally, what are the new skills and tools emerging with, and in turn, defining DH practices in India? So these were, of course, a set of introductory questions that we used to kind of begin that mapping exercise. And I think a lot of these still remain pertinent today, because the question of method, the question of epistemology the question of ontological stake of a discipline, right? Of any new discipline, any new practice, I think is always something that re-emerges and kind of reinvents itself with every sort of turn that we see in that particular sort of disciplinary framework. So, yeah, so I think just to quickly go over sort of some of the kind of observations and reflections we had on history's context and scope of the discipline, right? So the emergence of the field of digital humanities has been a crucial development in the way interdisciplinary modes of research and knowledge production have been imagined, particularly with respect to what is seen as the role of digital technologies and the internet in these spaces. As a field of study that has been premised on the digital, the growth, access, and use of internet and digital technologies is integral to much of DH practice, scholarship, and pedagogy today. There is also now a substantive body of critique on the field, especially its Anglo-American, Anglo-European antecedents and specific origin stories in humanities, computing, textual studies, etc. Several efforts to decolonize DH have also highlighted visible knowledge gaps in the field, including the need to create a diverse, multilingual, and accessible DH. Efforts within DH to address linguistic barriers in particular have been key, especially in countries in the global south. Such efforts, however, have also been shaped by the larger, persistent infrastructural challenges of the internet. So the discourse around DH as a discipline or field is still developing in the Indian context, and the term has often been reiterated with respect to connections that technology has forged with several areas such as education, computing, cultural heritage, archival practice, design, maker cultures, etc., to name a few. So this is sort of a definition we came up with in the course of our engagement with the field, and as part of a larger collective of actors working in the field called the Digital Humanities Alliance for Research and Teaching Innovations, or THARTI. And you can see that in the top left-hand corner. So this critique of, again, like, as the earlier definitions sort of seem to be talking about, and what we were looking at also is really the idea of DH in India engaging with this sort of renewed, or looking at a renewed engagement with the politics of humanities knowledge. Right? So various forms of engagement with the digital that the term suggests, developing software, creating new tools, methods for research and practice, producing and reorganizing archives, building theory, rethinking pedagogy, etc. So, which enable us to study and work with the digital more critically from the perspective of the humanities disciplines. And this sort of critique of the Anglo-centric form of DH and the general lack of diversity in the field has also been growing over the last several years, with the emergence of fields such as post-colonial and feminist DH, and the development of collectives such as South Asian DH, Global Outlook DH, and multilingual DH. As Domenico Fiormonte notes, the problem is not only that of a difference of methodological approaches and a perceived lack of theoretical framing around tools and platforms, but also due to limitations posed by the geopolitical and cultural linguistic composition of the discipline. This is further complicated by a set of infrastructural challenges or gaps in the Indian context, most notably in the form of a digital divide, which precedes even the development of the discipline itself. In more recent years, concerns include the growth of a seemingly neoliberal model of education that has brought about drastic changes in the functioning of universities. So there have been lots of debates on privatization of education, entry of foreign institutions, etc. Even as institutions have been grappling with several basic issues, often technology is seen as a recourse, and this is seen in the urgency of sort of large-scale adoption of digital technologies over the last few years. Right? So how are we sort of critically thinking about the kind of infrastructure building that we've been engaged with Where are sort of questions of large-scale access being looked at critically, access to education, digital literacy, etc. So where are these questions being engaged with as well? And how are we looking at that, even in terms of our, whether it is policy, whether it is sort of engagement through teaching and through pedagogy, where are these questions also being reflected on is a sort of question that we've been thinking about. So that said, there are still several infrastructural limitations to digital humanities work in India. So Shanmugapriya and Nirmala Menon, in their work on situated practices in DH in India, reiterate how the lack of specific forms of infrastructure, such as digital humanities labs, digital humanities pedagogy, digital tools and software, and institutional and government support, has impeded Indian humanities scholars from leveraging the affordances of computational techniques and resources. And these are all, like a lot of the DH work that we've seen, especially in the global context, has also been quite resource heavy. And that's something that we're very slowly kind of building towards in India. They further emphasize a specific deficit of such technologies in the realm of Indian languages, for example, in terms of the availability of tools and software, and importantly, as exacerbated by the divide between humanities and computer sciences. As mentioned earlier, these challenges have predated the digital humanities and continue to exist in the ways in which we imagine and conceptualize digital infrastructures today and platforms, tools, and languages that we imagine it uses to communicate with us. So these are just sort of visualizations that I've pulled up from a paper by Shanmugapriya and Nirmala Menon. The reference is there at the bottom of the slide, and it just gives you a sort of quick map of what are the different kind of digital humanities types of work that is happening, the types of infrastructure that is available, and of course, where it is actually located in India. Okay, so to move on to the question of values and methods, this is something that I've just pulled up from a resource called A Guide to Digital Humanities, Values and Methods. This is available with the Northwestern University Library. It's by Josh Hahn. And the set of methods, of course, is also drawn from the report on digital humanities, the publication on digital humanities by Burdick and collaborators. So as you can see, there are several methods that have been used in digital humanities work. And this is really to give you a sense of also the global kind of span of the kind of work that is being done with DH, right? So, and of course, what are the values that it espouses? The idea of criticality, of engaging with theory. It is work that is iterative and experimental. It is collaborative by nature and distributed, multimodal and performative, and open and accessible. So if you look at the list of methods that are mentioned on the site, these are, of course, very sort of, they engage with different kinds of platforms, different disciplinary kind of methods, and definitely various tools and software that also come into the picture when we talk about these methods. So I think for the presentation today, I will just talk about one or two of them. But of course, there is now a lot more literature and a lot of resources that one can access to look at each of these methods, and particularly how they've been used in different digital humanities work in different parts of the world. So on the question of methods itself, right? So methods in DH have also been under some debate and contestation, especially in terms of the distance between theory and practice. So in a lot of ways, the field itself has been under some debate for sort of an emphasis on methods, on the use of different kinds of tools, the use of different kinds of software, but not having the sort of theoretical framework keeping up with those changes and the use of those specific methods, right? So, and this of course is these are kind of different points of view as we've seen in the debate around DH. Mm-hmm. So as Tanya Clement notes in that initial volume on debates in digital humanities. Most critiques of DH, both from the social sciences and the humanities, do not point to a lack of accuracy, variability, or other limitations of method. Rather, most critiques of DH point to a decoupling of method from the theoretical perspectives that would ordinarily help situate the kind of intellectual effort being engaged with. She further argues that situating digital humanities within a humanist epistemological framework must also entail an explicit articulation of our methodological perspectives, or how our techniques are tied to theory. Digital humanities scholarship that does not engage with theory risks being perceived as unconcerned with interpretive, situated, and subjective knowledge production, and therefore displaced from the epistemic culture of the humanities. So even this perspective, right, has also been contested in many spaces. Especially if one were to look at work emerging, say, from activism, different types of media, community media, for example, or maker cultures. This is not to suggest, of course, that these fields do not have a body of theory or do not have a theoretical framing, but this is also to say that they may not fit in within very strict and very rigid disciplinary norms of theoretical framing. Right? So Clement herself then goes on to talk about, or she asks for a self-reflexive awareness towards methodology, and that methodological perspectives, as driven by the historical, present, and perceived future context of a project, shape and are shaped by practical and theoretical concerns. So a lot of work in DH as a field definitely draws from existing work in, say, broader digital cultures or internet studies that has been taking place in India. It draws from a lot of policy debates that have shaped how the internet has grown and what kinds of regulation that has grown with it and around it. It is shaped by how humanities practices have changed with the advent of the internet. And so I think these are kind of various areas to keep in mind as we talk about what are different methods to engage with when we talk about digital humanities. Okay, so I'll move on to two specific areas of focus, which I have also looked at in the initial report on digital humanities, but also on continuing work since then. So the first is on archival practice. Archival practice forms a very important and large area of work in DH. In fact, a lot of the early work in digital humanities in the global context has actually been around archival work and building sort of databases and corpora of digitized material. Right? So, and that's sort of reflected in India as well as what in the report, of course, and a lot of people that we spoke to have also characterized as an archival turn in India. So digitization forms an essential yet sometimes invisible aspect of the discourse around fields like DH, digital cultures and cultural analytics. As much research and practice in these fields depends on the creation and availability of digitized corpora of cultural content. Digitization efforts undertaken at archives and other cultural and memory institutions become particularly significant in this context. Though primarily undertaken with the objective of preservation, the digital turn has brought about a change in the nature and scope of archives in terms of promoting better public access and use of archival material. The digitization of existing corpora of cultural content, whether located in state archives, collaborative repositories, or private collections, is an important component of such archival initiatives. In India, like with many parts of the world, the imagination of the archive has largely remained rooted in colonial contexts of administration and governance, which continues to define much of the practice and scholarship around it today. The concept of the archive, therefore, still has a strong relationship with the exercise of power within the nation state. And this is especially visible now in efforts to unpack and decolonize this particular mode of framing digitization efforts at archival and other memory institutions. The advent of the internet and digital technologies in the last decade or so, however, has led to a shift in this particular imagination of the concept of the archive as primarily a repository space for history and memory, with the digital archive often blurring the line between these two. The archival object has been transformed greatly with digitization, where now apart from text, images, audiovisual materials, oral histories, performance, and works of new media also come within the ambit of archival work. Traditional challenges of archival management, such as storage, curation, dissemination, etc., continue to persist in the digital domain as well, along with new questions emerging around digitized or born digital content, especially those related to access, infrastructure, and language. A lot of new archival initiatives are focused on developing accessible, networked, and dynamic archives that are able to address the above challenges. The entry of private archival initiatives, often by individuals and institutions, such as universities, has further changed the landscape of archival work in India. With the rise of more niche and private archival spaces today, questions of privacy, ownership, and access have acquired another dimension, as a lot of content is personal and often a documentation of the everyday rather than specific historical events, figures, or cultural forms. So we can look at some examples of how digitization and archival practice really has sort of changed in the last couple of years, and where this informs also how we're thinking about digital humanities work. Right? So these are just sort of screenshots of different archival institutions. I mean, this is, of course, the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts and their project on a project called the National Cultural Audiovisual Archives, which is a large archive on primarily sort of video and music material, audio material, on cultural practices in India, and sort of the digitization efforts that have come into play in creating this large archive, right? And also for a large state institution to imagine the level of sort of open access and the questions related to open access on its platforms. The Center for Community Knowledge at Ambedkar University, as the name suggests, of course, works largely on community knowledge practices. So they've been doing a lot of community-related archiving, and this is one of their projects on the Neighborhood Museum in Delhi. This sort of brings up several interesting questions about sort of who are the kind of collaborators in community archiving processes, what are sort of different questions that come up around the kind of materials that are collected, etc., which sort of move away also from traditional forms of archiving and traditional practices and methods of archiving. The Indian Memory Project is, again, it's in many ways a born digital archive, you could say. It in fact started off as a Facebook page and now is sort of a full-fledged archive that's available, which traces sort of history and identity of the Indian subcontinent through images in personal archives, so largely looking at letters and photographs. So, and finally coming to Indian cinema, which is also a born digital archive of Indian film. And if you look at the sort of interface, then you also get an idea of the different kinds of aspects of the film text that the archive is looking at. So I'll talk about these two archives in a little bit more detail, just to kind of look at the question of methods in a little bit more detail. So Indian Cinema is an online archive of films that are out of copyright, and it's built on a free libre open source software called Pandora, a web application that helps organize and manage large decentralized archives of video materials and create metadata and time-based annotations in forms of text, in the form of text, photographs, images, and posters. So users can edit and annotate a particular sequence in the film according to a time code, and search and organize content through different filters, such as color and object recognition. This offers a different mode of engagement with the film by creating a new kind of research object, structured through different forms of meaning, such as time, date, maps, etc. The film object is layered by different kinds of data, so whether it's text, images, writing, tagging, and annotations, thus facilitating new ways of reading the primary text for the film. This is possible now precisely because of the digital, and it also illustrates the ways in which the primary object of inquiry, the film or archival object as such, as well as the methods of study have evolved or need to evolve in response to advancements in technology. The Indian Memory Project, which is illustrative of how conditions of Web 2.0 have been conducive to the creation of new archival efforts, describes itself as an online curated, visual and narrative-based archive that traces a history and identities of the Indian subcontinent via photographs and letters found in personal archives. The archive presently features 200 curated stories framed around photographs and letters from the pre-digital era. The project is illustrative of how the nature of archives today has shifted in the digital moment to become more ephemeral, personal, and connected to the everyday. The archive essentially began as a Facebook group, which was started to crowdsource heritage photographs for a book project on Indian weddings, which resulted in such a rich collection of photographs and, importantly, stories about the Indian subcontinent from different perspectives, contributing therefore to multiple histories. So like with the other institutional archives mentioned earlier, better access to archival content was one of the key motivations behind setting up this project, and the various affordances of social media and digital platforms to crowdsource, organize, curate, tag, and circulate that the platform offered these possibilities. So the Scottish Cemetery Project again, which is sort of anchored at Presidency University and run by Dr. Shouvik Mukherjee. So this again is a very interesting kind of archive database sort of project, which looks at mapping narratives in migration and exchange, and also has very interesting ways of visualizing patterns of migration, what have been sort of key historical events around that period. So again, that's something to look at when you're looking at sort of historical narratives around migration. So moving on quickly then to digital texts. So again, the advent of digital technologies has meant a lot for looking at what has really been in many ways the primary object of inquiry in say the humanities, social sciences, for instance, right, which is what would we call the text. So how is the emerging changing discourse around digital objects informing ideas, concerns about materiality and new forms of writing? Whether in the context of archives, software, social media, or even a platform like Wikipedia, for instance, the challenges of writing or making digital objects are several and multifaceted. Changes in the nature of textuality and the methods of meaning making are related to the process of making digital objects itself, which are often obfuscated in the discourse around them. The exploration of these processes itself and the understanding of digital objects as tactile, material, and embodied may present another entry point into understanding the materialities of new digital forms of writing. Understanding writing as a technologized process that is at the same time material, affective, and embodied is an important sort of entry point into these conversations. Writing or technologies of writing have different materialities, economic, corporeal, linguistic, etc. The manner of transformation of cultural artifacts, textual, audiovisual, archival objects into the digital form is an interesting entry point to understanding this materiality and the nature of digitality itself. The digital object presents a new kind of text that is difficult to grasp. The neat segregations of form, content, and process seem to blur here, and there is a need to unravel these layers to understand its textuality. So what kinds of creative digital labor spanning different domains of expertise would go into creating these objects, determining its aesthetics, and of course, its politics? Access and visibility, writing and intent are also related questions to be asked. So this further determines how practices of writing and engagement with textual objects as well, which are very much located in print and provisional unities such as the book, also change or the way we think about these sort of fixed entities such as books, magazines, etc. How do they change when we think of the digital sort of form that they take. So some examples here then would be hypertext fiction, interactive fiction, say even collaborative note-taking, sort of several experiments around rethinking the book as a different form, right? Twitter fiction. So I think these are all sort of various ways in which we think about. We can think about how reading and writing practices have really changed with the digital. Right, so I'll quickly talk about another project called Vichitra, which also is one of the earliest digital humanities projects in India. Vichitra is an online variorum of the works of the Indian writer and poet Rabindranath Tagore, developed by the School of Cultural Texts and Records at Jadavpur University in Kolkata. It contains most versions of Tagore's works, poetry, drama, fiction, and non-fiction, but it excludes letters, speeches, textbooks, and translations, except those done by Tagore himself. So the sort of process of developing this variorum itself has been an interesting one and speaks to, of course, the earlier questions of digitization, of materiality of reading and writing that we've been talking about. Digitization is a lengthy process of sourcing material, photographing, scanning, making copies searchable with optical character recognition, so which optical character recognition helps you search through a digitized text, uploading and cross-referencing, etc. So the website has 3 unique functionalities: the bibliography, search engine, and a collation tool named Probabe. The bibliography is linked to the scans and transcriptions of different versions of a text, and these are open to the data tracking resources of the website. Using the search engine to track a word or phrase will lead to all its occurrences in the entire corpus. The collation software called Probabe, meaning difference in Bengali, collates the different versions of a work at 3 levels: chapter, paragraph, and word, and tracks all the migrations and variations across editions. The project has received an overwhelming response, but not without some unique challenges, such as locating and acquiring content, lack of OCR for Bengali fonts, and problems of privacy and access, among others. Using computational tools, it is now possible to search across such a large corpus of material and pose new questions related to their access in the digital form and context and usage. It also offers important provocations for understanding language and representation in the digital context and our interaction with technology. What is the role of such a platform or resource for literary studies or for the humanities scholar? How can we see traditional practices of reading and writing being reimagined in this context? So taking us back, of course, to those earlier questions that we were discussing about materiality of writing and how do they change really reading and writing practices. So this is just a quick example of how the collation software is used on Vichitra. So if you pull up a particular poem, so say a poesy, and you run the collation software, you will actually find 3 different versions of with sort of edits or changes as they've been made with subsequent editions of that poem. So, which is kind of like what an actual variorum would, that's the function of the actual variorum, and that's what you see with the digital form of the variorum. So moving on quickly then to sort of 2 other projects that I want to very quickly talk about. A lot of work in digital humanities in India has also revolved around design and design thinking. And this is an example of this really interesting game designed by Padmini Ray Murray, K.V. Ketan, and Joel Johnson. This is part of the Global Game Jam in 2016. And I mean, while this may not be characterized as a digital humanities project, it speaks to, of course, a lot of interesting questions that we've been asking about the discipline itself in the Indian context, right? And Padmini herself is a very well-known scholar of the field, a scholar and practitioner of the field, and she's been working with design thinking and game cultures in India for quite some time. And in fact, has also been at the helm of the first degree level sort of DH course at Shrishti in Bangalore. So again, looking at sort of what are critical lenses through which we think about design cultures in India. How do we look at game studies, right? So these are sort of questions that come up with this game. This is on the Shabarimala sort of issue and the access of women to the temples. This is an interesting kind of game designed around that particular issue and around that time. And it also tracks what has been kind of public discourse with that issue at that point in time. So it gives you an interesting way to engage with sort of local events and things that have been happening in our context. This is another interesting project by students at Flame University in Pune, where they've been working on putting together a set of community cookbooks. So a database around cuisine, but also norms around food and food histories, and sort of putting together a digital database of these stories, right? So this is, again, a very interesting take on sort of local histories, but also where they're interspersed with larger histories of, say, religion, caste, culture. And how does bringing this online also facilitate a different kind of engagement through its access on the internet? So I'll just move on then quickly to sort of questions that we should be thinking of when we're looking to engage with digital humanities and digital humanities methods in particular, right? So as we see with a lot of the projects that we've looked at, what is the role of non-traditional, extra-institutional, non-academic or alternative spaces in humanities practice in producing and creating new kinds of knowledge? So a lot of the work that we've been talking about has also been work that, of course, in these particular projects, they've been sort of anchored and held by a lot of wonderful people working in different academic institutions, but also speak to practices that exist outside of, say, academic spaces in many ways, right? So how do kind of those practices and those histories come to inform the way in which we work and engage with digital technologies? That's one thing to sort of think about very closely. The increased visibility of new objects and methods within informal and marginal spaces of knowledge production. So again, the new kinds of objects that we were talking about. Where do digital technologies inform and change the traditional objects of humanistic inquiries, whether it is the film, whether it is the written text, whether it is an image, whether it is data, right? So when we talk about a datafication of text, what kind of object does it create? And what are the methods then we use to access and analyze that object, right? So that is something to sort of think about. This demands different and often innovative methods of inquiry and whether they alter disciplinary modes of humanities practice and research. So where are they changing traditional objects and traditional forms of inquiry? So where are they changing our traditional practice or method of, say, closed reading, right? So how does a digital variorum like Vichitra inform the practice of closed reading that a lot of us as humanities and literary sort of researchers or literature students, I was one myself. So how do we see this changing the way that we are reading different objects today? Moving towards new creative and critical forms of digital literacy and pedagogy. So how do we see these, the advent of these new tools and platforms changing the kind of digital literacy that is needed to engage with them, right? So whether it is through access alone, so access through devices, access to platforms, and not just access, but the knowledge to be able to use and engage well with these tools, right? So to be able to, for instance, work on Wikipedia, to be able to engage with, say, a Bond Digital Archive, to be able to use specific tools with video editing or working with data, doing data visualizations, etc. So where do we understand the sort of need for different types of digital literacy in terms of engaging with these methods. And how do we bring that in also into our pedagogical practice and sort of teaching learning strategies really within and outside the classroom. Finally, of course, to end with the ontological and epistemological stake of DH. In short, what are the kinds of new questions it enables us to ask? So that I think is the sort of key question for us to reflect on, really. What is sort of the advent of these new digital technologies doing for us in terms of our engagement with these new objects? How is it informing the way that a particular discipline asks questions, teaches us to ask questions, and what kind of new questions does it enable us to ask? Does it help us, as we saw in the definitions earlier, talk about these questions or talk about these objects critically? Does it help us turn a critical lens onto digital technologies? Does it help us remap and contest the way in which these disciplines have been engaging with objects traditionally? So even with archives, for instance, does the growth of a born digital archive also help us with thinking about, for instance, a feminist, anti-caste archive or history-making process? Right? So would these be new ways in which the opening up of digital technologies would help us think about the discourse on digitality and, of course, on the humanities around us? So I'm just going to end with a couple of selected resources that I've just put up, just to sort of begin with sort of looking at some of the resources around us on digital humanities. There is the Digital Humanities Alliance for Research and Teaching Innovations. That's the URL. So it's a collective of various actors across India now. It's a large collective of actors. And of course, you will be able to locate a lot of the ongoing work on DH through GATI and its various sort of groups on different platforms. The Center for Digital Humanities in Pune has been doing a winter school in digital humanities for several years now. So that's again a space to look at skill building. Exploring digital humanities in India is a volume that sort of brings together a lot of key work on digital humanities emerging from India, a lot of key writing around it. The Humanities Commons is a large sort of database and repository for different kinds of tools and writing, a lot of different types of resources related to open access in the humanities. It's not specific to digital humanities, but a lot of the work around digital humanities, for instance, even sort of the work that came out of the annual Digital Humanities Conference, which is organized every year by ADHO, the Association for Digital Humanities Organization. So a lot of that work is also housed on Humanities Commons. The Digital Humanities Summer Institute by the University of Victoria, I think. That's one of, again, a very old sort of space for digital humanities training. And they offer a winter school in DH, which this year is actually open and online. So that way, again, that's something to definitely look at. So I think that's the end of my presentation. I hope I have kept to time, and I look forward to your conversations.
Thank you, Ms. Neha. Thank you so much for that excellent session. Very interesting. Just before I go on to the question answer, I just wanted to ask you, is it fine if the session is recorded, Sneha? Is that fine with you? If you record the session is recorded?
Yeah, absolutely. I presume it was recorded from the very beginning.
Yes. Because I missed asking you that. So I thought maybe I'll check with you once again.
No worries.
Yes. We have a couple of questions on the chat box. I'll start with two of the questions together. One is by Professor Khedekar. His question is, what care must be taken while maintaining or protecting the intellectual property rights? And a very similar question from Dr. J. Vanita, where she from Loyola College, Chennai. She's a professor of sociology. She's asking, is there any forum to know more about IPR? Could you just probably tell us a little bit more about that?
Right. Thank you so much for those questions. I think those are, I think both the question around open access itself and specifically around IPR, I think quite integral to particularly work being done on digital platforms, right? So with respect to the care question, definitely, I think looking at sort of intellectual property of the work that you're engaging with, I think that's something to really keep in mind, especially when you're looking at digital content that is openly available, right? A lot of the work being produced with digital humanities, for instance, because by its very nature, it's kind of collaborative and open, also tends to be under open licenses. So I don't know if you're aware, but I mean, I'm sure most people are familiar now with open licenses, with Creative Commons licenses, right? So Creative Commons offers you a set of different licenses under which content can be put out. And that basically helps you kind of reuse that content, redistribute it. There are different levels of access even within that. There's non-commercial, there is sort of, which allows for remix, for redistribution with attribution. So I think this also helps kind of give you a sense of why even open access is also a complicated term. Things, there has been a lot of debate about putting out sort of content freely on the web for use by, sort of by the general public, as it were, right? So a lot of memory institutions, for instance, have been engaging with that question. So even with DH projects that you engage with, I think, of course, a lot of the sort of copyrighted content will not right away be available. I mean, we can see that with paywall journals, with sort of creative work that is under intellectual property, right? So I think it's really a sort of debate really to engage with. It is a sort of kind of, what do I say, conversation to be had in terms of what kind of open access do we want to enable. In many cases, like with archival work, for instance, there have also been questions about whether things should be open access, right? Especially when you are looking at making content related to, say, a particular community or a particular group, a vulnerable or marginalized group, for instance, or a sensitive topic or sensitive issue available online, right? So then do we allow complete open access? Should it be sort of regulated access? Should it be access that only lets you use that content for specific purposes, say for teaching, but not for commercial use, right? So this is an ongoing discussion. And I think that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about particularly the idea of care, which I think is very important. With IPR, I think there are lots of different spaces now that that you can kind of look at, different legal sort of research organizations. So the Center for Policy Research, for instance, there are, I mean, even at CIS, there are lots of researchers who've been working on IPR. And I think one would definitely find a lot of resources available, online as well. So I think with the specific kind of need that you have, I think I'd be able to kind of point you to resources. But now for sure, you will find a lot of institutions also working on IPR itself as a field. Right?
We have an interesting question by NK Jyoti, where the question is, how has digital humanities bridged the authorship divide between male vis-a-vis female perspectives? And we have Suvarna Jadhav also asking, how will it help in studying the historical sources? Probably, if you can throw some light on that, Sneha. The authorship divide between male and female perspectives. How has digital humanities bridged the authorship divide between male and female perspectives? And the other question is, how will it help in studying the historical sources when we get into DH?
Right. So with male and female perspectives as such, I mean, I think DH, like with any other sort of disciplinary field, right? When it started, I think it really went through, and still in many cases, I think it really has been going through the same kind of debates related to diversity, related to inclusion, related to representational kind of parity, let's say, right? So whose voices are really being included, whose voices are strongest in the DH discourse, let's say, right? And there's been a lot of writing, there's been a lot of critique around this. There's now a whole body of work on feminist DH, let's say. And I wouldn't say this is specific to DH. I mean, this has been an ongoing sort of, I mean, if you see in literature, for instance, if you see in, art history, this has been a kind of, this question about perspective and voice, I think has been inherent through a lot of, disciplines and a lot of the work that we've been doing. So in DH in particular, I think, yeah, definitely. I think as a field itself, I think just the discourse around kind of intersectionality and Rupika Rissam's work is actually quite interesting to read in that context. The sort of first couple of slides that I had put up. Intersectionality has been an important kind of point in that discussion. So another kind of work that I'd want to point people towards is, again, Padmini Ray Murray's work on feminist archives. So that is available in a volume called Bodies of Information. So where she again talks about what does it mean to create a feminist archive. There is a very interesting book called Data Feminism by Catherine D'Ignazio and Lauren Klein. So again, talks about what a gendered lens through which we look at data, and how that has informed the way that sense making around data has also changed in the last couple of years. So there are lots of interesting initiatives, and I think by its nature of being open and collaborative, I think it has definitely kind of brought a lot of these voices to the fore. But I think it's an ongoing sort of discussion, an ongoing kind of negotiation really that's happening in the field. So, yeah, sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Sneha, go ahead.
The second question was on historical sources. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think I need a little bit more context to that question.
I guess maybe I will just ask them to elaborate on it. Probably we can go on to the next question, if you don't mind, Sneha. Can we? Yeah. There is a question, interesting question by Rajini Khetri. Can you also talk about the digital content ownership and ethical practices guidelines for researchers? I guess, the ethical practices and guidelines that researchers could be given. And how can we get growth and history of Indian railways from archives? There's a question, I think, specific questions on certain specific topics.
Right. Yeah. The digital content ownership is really a very sort of, I think, key question to a lot of these debates. So, and digital content can span anything from public content on the web. So whether it is a website, whether it is, say, a blog post you have written, to a published magazine, to a news media article, to an archive, it can also be personal data, right? So it can also be personal content. So if someone is doing a study, let's say on WhatsApp, which is actually a bit difficult to do because of encrypted, so, and that's for privacy reasons. But if you're doing, say, a study on mailing lists or data on, any kind of personal social network, for instance, right? So digital content spans a wide range of content. And there are, of course, different kinds of regulations that are already in place that govern also the use of this type of content. As researchers, I think keeping in mind sort of questions and ethics around ownership, around access, around privacy particularly of sensitive material, right? So particularly, say, when you're recording information, for instance, right? When you're recording, say, if you were doing, say, a study on mailing lists, if you're recording personal responses, if you're recording personal data, right? So what are kind of ethical practices that you need to keep in mind when you engage with personal recording? So do you keep that data on longer? How do you inform the person who you have collected the data from? How do you then sort of get rid of that data when it's no longer being used in research? How do you seek permissions, right? So if you are looking at content that is under copyright, then how do you get the rights, or how do you get permissions to be able to use that content? If you are working with, like I said, marginalized or vulnerable groups, and you are sort of doing, say, digital recording of, say, interviews, for instance, how do you make sure that no personal data is kind of revealed in the sort of final report that you're putting together? How do you kind of, even before that, I think, how do you understand the concept of informed consent, right? And informed consent, not only to kind of engage with and record, but also to put out in public and access, right? So how do you understand consent at different levels? How is the notion of privacy of different types of data? How does it change when it is a physical artifact versus when it's actually a digital artifact once it goes online, right? So I think this is a very wide-ranging question, and it's a question that needs to be understood in consonance with sort of laws and policy. There is now policy around sort of personal and non-personal data, for instance. There's been, of course, a lot of policy debates around IPR and content. So how do you understand that in consonance with that? But most importantly, I think, in consonance with an ethics of care, placing the sort of object of inquiry, the sort of people you are engaging with, the communities that you are engaging with, really at the center or at the focus of sort of these inquiries, and making sure that their sort of perspectives, their voices are kind of at the center of this. I think that's the sort of thing to keep in mind. So yeah, so I hope I've been able to cover that question adequately.
Thank you, Ms. Neha, for that question. Probably if I could ask a question from my end, if you don't mind. I mean, I really liked, you spoke about Indian Memory Project and the Scottish Cemetery Project, and most interestingly, the Vichitra project that was going on in West Bengal. So my question is, do you envisage any gap in this field of digital humanities when we compare India vis-a-vis other countries, or do you think we should have more collaborative projects with other countries in this space? Do you see any gap with other countries in India? Sneha?
Right. Thanks for that question, Professor Tarakan. So I think, as with any fields, I think there are gaps. I think a lot of the literature now that is emerging around DH, for instance, talks about, like, say, infrastructure gaps, right? I think that comes up quite explicitly in a lot of discussions around DH. I think just in terms of the resources of, say, digital humanities labs and say, software skills, right? And I think the skills question is also, skills and resources question is also very strongly tied to a digital divide sort of question, right? So just not having enough kind of access to digital technologies, say, in the way that, say, other countries that have been doing work on digital humanities have had that kind of access to. Even digital literacy in Indian languages, right, which would actually help us do such, like, a lot of interesting work, with a lot of local kind of resources and resources in different languages. So I think these are, like, a lot of broad infrastructure gaps, but they're also there for a reason. They're there because of a particular history, a very checkered sort of history that we have with how technologies, information communication technologies, and the internet has sort of developed and grown in India, right? And that also puts us in a very unique space, I think, to understand these questions and to understand even questions around access. Like, even the question of access needs to be problematized. Large-scale access and building large-scale digital infrastructure, while it's good, also needs to be looked at critically, right? That what is it enabling? What is it invisibilizing, right? So I think, like, for instance, when the whole sort of COVID crisis began, and I'm sure, like, as teachers, you'd be able to speak to it, best, really. The challenges of moving to a digital platform for teachers, for students alike, right? Even like, say, for students to be able to kind of engage in a classroom, for teachers to be able to sort of imagine an online classroom, for those who have not been used to that before. I think it presents its own very curious and very unique kind of set of challenges, right? So I think it's kind of important to keep those gaps in mind. But having said that, I think it's also important to imagine or think of our own histories through which we approach this field, right? So the strengths that we have in terms of our own kind of histories, say, in particular fields, right? The kinds of texts or resources, games, I think. So I'm just talking about particular fields here. But I think it's important to kind of work in the field with an approach that takes those local contexts and those local histories also very much in mind. So I think that's kind of, that's how I would see kind of working with and working around those gaps as well, to kind of see how digital humanities can then be that kind of critical space of engagement.
Professor Shazia could go ahead. You have a question.
You're mute.
Shazia, you're muted. Sorry, could you unmute, please? Thank you.
Sorry. Hello, ma'am. Thank you so much for the very enlightening session. In your presentation, you have mentioned about financial literacy. And I would like to ask that how can we address this issue of financial literacy, especially in a country like India, where majority of our population, okay, though they might be educated, but we cannot say that all of us have reached a stage where we can call us that we are also digitally aware, okay, about various schemes and the policies of the government. Okay, so my question to you is, how can we address this issue when it comes to understanding various governmental schemes, and especially taking it to the grassroots level, where majority of the people they are not literate in a sense.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Professor Sheikh. So I think that's a very pertinent and difficult question, not a question that can be answered easily at all. I think we're very much in a stage where the answer is kind of still in progress, right? Because there are different initiatives by the government, for instance, by different organizations, specifically to address this issue of what you're talking about essentially as a digital divide, right? And to look at the digital divide also critically. So like with the access question alone, right? Like where I said, large scale access by itself may not be sufficient, but we need to look at what that access is actually enabling people to do, right? So there is no kind of real consequence of having access to a device, for instance, if you don't know how to use that device, if you don't know how to use that device in your language, because a large part of the internet, a majority of the internet really, functions very much in dominant languages, in English and other dominant languages. So if that computer is unable to kind of respond back to me in my language, in the language that I'm most comfortable with, then it is not of any real sort of consequence to me, for instance. So I think those are kind of, again, what we call, like what has really been called in a lot of ICT discourse, last mile connectivity, really. So how do you enable connectivity and engagement with sort of the, user who's at the last mile of this network, right? And that's really a difficult question to engage with. I think there are different kinds of efforts being made. Like, for instance, with accessibility, right? So for persons with disabilities, I think there are a lot of efforts being made to try and address the question of accessibility and how to make interfaces, digital interfaces, accessible to people with disabilities. There's a lot of work, for instance, in voice technologies. So if you've also seen, I think there are now lots of sort of mainstream, ads that have been talking about how voice recognition and voice interfaces actually helps resolve this issue of language, for instance. Right? But even there are challenges. A lot of voice interfaces do not recognize Indian accents, for instance, right? Or local sort of dialect or language accents. There's a limited number of languages that are available on a lot of devices. So these are all kind of spaces for research, for policy investment, for a lot of work really in terms of infrastructure building. But again, it's a space to be built with sort of collaboration and with kind of the engagement of the stakeholders, with the engagement of people that we're really thinking of when we think of sort of, let's say, large scale access to technology. So yeah, so I'm not sure that answered your question, but I just wanted to kind of think aloud about it a little bit more. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Dr. Shazia, would you have any other question, or shall we now? I think we would. Do you have another question, Dr. Shazia?
No, ma'am, we don't have any other questions.
Right. Then I thank you so much. I would invite now Dr. Shazia to propose a formal vote of thanks for the amazing sessions that we've had today. Over to you, Shazia.
Hello, Sneha ma'am. Thank you, Soni ma'am. So on behalf of the college, on behalf of the faculty of St. Xavier's College, principal, and also on behalf of the participants, I would like to extend my deep gratitude to you, ma'am. This is your topic, which is digitizing humanity. It is an emerging discourse, and I would say that many of us are not familiar with the subject. So what you taught us, it brought a new perspective, and I would say that this session kind of give us an incentive that how can we take more leverage by relying upon digital technology. And then you had also explained different platforms and different sites, like from where we can extract more and more resources, more and more sources of the information. And at the same point of time, you had also highlighted what are the gray areas and what are the challenges, what are the constraints, like infrastructural constraints, and how we need to liberate ourselves from the bondage of colonial legacy. So it was a very enlightening session. Thank you so much, ma'am. And I would like to end this session on this note. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Ms. Sneha, for that amazing session. Thank you once again. And I'm sure our participants from across the country have really benefited and learned a lot about this new topic of digital humanities. Thank you, ma'am. Now that we have come to the end of session 1, day 1, we would now move on to the common session where our participants for the Faculty Development Program of the Sciences who have joined us back here will be joining us for the common session by Dr. Bimal Roy. I hand over the session to Professor Roy Thomas from the BSc IT department. Over to you, Professor Roy.
Soni, we have to wait for near about 10 minutes because the timing is 4:30.
Yes, we will wait for a few minutes and then we will begin. Thank you.
me how to fly and how to stay. In a world outside so differently, saviors, you help me become more me. You help me become more me. You help me become more me. You gave me roots and wings, saviors. Open my eyes to things, saviors. Somewhere along the way, you taught me how to fly and how to stay. In a world outside so differently, saviors, you helped me become more me.
Fly like an eagle, discover new skies. With wings we've been given to soar ever high. Over mountain and ocean beach, learning from what they teach, believing that we can reach way beyond.
Saviors, you gave me roots and wings. Saviors, open my eyes to things. Saviors, somewhere along the way, you taught me how to fly and
Bimal sir, are you there? Bimal sir?
in a world outside so differently, saviors, you help me become more me.
Walk over rough road.
Yeah. Do you see me?
Yes, sir.
To ask the right questions and answers to find. Even though we stand alone, we know that we have grown. All because
Lydia, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm there.
Yeah, so please start.
Good evening, everyone. We welcome you to session 2 of the FDP Day 1. We have with us an eminent speaker who will be introduced by Mr. Roy Thomas, the HOD of IT Department. Roy, sir, over to you.
Thank you, Lydia. Good evening, all, and welcome to the second session of FDP. I'm extremely glad for having got the opportunity to introduce the speaker of the day, Dr. Bimal Roy. Padma Shri Dr. Bimal Roy is the head of the R.C. Bose Center for Cryptology and Security, Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata. He joined the institute in 1984 and was a director from 2010 to 2015. He has done his PhD from University of Waterloo, Canada. He completed his post-graduation in statistics from the Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata in 1979. He was honored with the prestigious Padma Shri Award by the Government of India in 2015 for his accomplishment and contribution to the education. He has also received other awards such as Teachers Award by Indian National Science Academy, IBM Faculty Award for Research, Teaching and Initiative in Cryptology. Now speaking about his professional services, he is the chairperson of the National Statistical Commission since 2019. He is also the chairman of steering board Indo-French Center for Applied Mathematics, also a member of Scientific Council, Indo-French Center for the Promotion of Advanced Research. He is a board member of National Board for Higher Mathematics since 2012. Our association with the Dr. Bimal Roy started at the time when he became the founder of MSc Big Data Analytics program, which was started in St. Xavier's College in collaboration with TCS in the year 2019. I hope this association will become stronger in the years to come. We are fortunate to have among us such a high-profile guest. I welcome Dr. Bimal Roy to this FDP program on behalf of St. Xavier's College. Thank you, sir. Now I request Dr. Bimal Roy to begin the session. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Roy Thomas. It has been almost 2 years that I've been in touch with your great institution. I heard of this institution. It's one of the oldest in Mumbai, maybe one of the oldest in country too. And the physical location, I love it. And I expressed my opinion that maybe I should come and spend a couple of days at your campus just before this ocean. But due to this pandemic, everything got messed up. Otherwise, I would have preferred to come physically and deliver this talk to the students. The one thing that matters most to the teachers like us, you are also a teacher, many of the teachers, that to see the body language of the students when you talk. So if I give a very boring lecture, the body language of the participants become one way, and if they're excited, you can feel it. And accordingly, you can possibly change them, your modulation, your content, your emphasizing on different topics, but that is missing. So this is a very peculiar scenario. So I have to talk without interacting with all the participants, without even looking at their body languages. So that has become a challenge during this pandemic. Anyway, so let me try. And as I told Mr. Thomas that normally I prepare slides only for a very deep technical presentation where you need to show formulas, relationships, graphs and stuff like that. But as I understand, the population is mixed. They are from various areas of science and may not be all that acquainted with the kind of mathematics that we use, because basically what we use in this particular topic of machine learning or artificial intelligence is mathematics, probability, statistics, and of course computer science. So all these put together, it makes machine learning. But above all, I think I must tell that intuition works the best, because the human intuition, as I feel, cannot be quite learned. So we develop our methods using our intuitions, and that's a challenge. And in this context, probably I like to tell a story first. What does a machine learning do? First, not the story. First, some observations. How this subject was created some 40, 50 years back. Somebody in a departmental store in US, we have these stores very recently, 5-10 years. But in US, this concept of departmental stores exists from 50 years back. I remember when I went to the student, when I also worked there, we used to go to the departmental stores to buy all kinds of things under the same roof. So be it bread, egg, fish or meat or chicken or biscuits, tea leaves, coffee, everything, maybe even just like Walmart and other stores. One person observed that a person, whenever he or she buys milk, almost definitely he or she buys bread. Now this is that person's in a particular store observation. And then so that's where it starts. And then they looked into the historical, all these bills that were generated in that machine for all the customers, even across all the stores, all the stores of this particular chain. And they found that almost if there has been a purchase of milk, in more than 90% cases, there was a purchase of bread also. So this understanding, which came out from this observation by probably a counter worker, gave rise to a policy decision for the store that when they place these items in the store, they always put bread and milk side by side. Now, it doesn't change anything for the store, but it gives convenience to the customer. So if you're buying milk, if you're buying bread, it's good to put the breads beside the milk instead of putting the bread after all the biscuits or cookies, which is probably 50 meters away. So this is what I consider to be, this was 1970s, I consider to be, within quote, the birth of machine, I would say human learning, but I would again say this is machine learning. So this kind of adaptation of data. So what the person needed, the person had some intuition looking at some data, and then the person formulated a methodology to verify his or her that basic intuition that person has grown, looking at certain observations. What is that intuition that the person grew with? That this is milk and bread, they are bought almost together at the same time. And then how do you validate? So they went to the various stores of that particular chain. It's not Walmart, it's some other chain. And they found out that in all the stores, if you look into this receipts, you see that if there was a purchase of milk, then definitely, well, with probability 0.95 or with 95% cases, they also purchased bread. And how does it help? The store puts them physically side by side. Now this is a very naive story, but this gives you the stage ready for this subject. Okay, then the next thing comes. So I'll tell a few stories about this thing. Now what this machine learning stuff try to do, they are trying to put the human intuitions, human reasoning, the way we think, the way we do arguments, they're trying to put into a kind of a software platform, kind of a program, which is probably used to mimic what a human does. And I'll tell you a story and a matter of caution for when you study this machine learning or AI. This is a short film. If you didn't see, you must see it. It's free on YouTube. The name of the movie is Anukul. Anukul is a 40-minute short movie. The main character was Saurabh Shukla. He acted by Saurabh Shukla, one of my very favorite actors in Bollywood. My other favorite actors are, of course, Anupam Kher and Rawal and others. But I mean, Saurabh Shukla is one of my favorite actors. It's a 14 minutes movie, very short movie. And the story was written by famous Satyajit Ray in 1960. It's almost 60 years back. People didn't even know about what is machine learning, what is artificial intelligence. It's a fiction, scientific fiction, that a company is making robots, which the robots can perform all the work a human does. Also at the same time, the robot can observe his or her masters, can also learn the habits, behavior of the particular master. And that is what is artificial intelligence or machine learning. The robot is learning the behavior of the, say for example, in the movie they would show, so Saurabh Shukla one day gets, he was a professor like us, a matter of caution, the story gives a caution to us. He is a university professor, he is getting tired of his maids, and he had maids to clean the house, clean the dishes, and so on and so forth. And a cook will cook the food, and sometimes they're absent, sometimes they are not well, sometimes they don't work to the fullest possible extent. So all kinds of problem he was having with all his mates. And then he finds an ad. An agency is renting. You can rent a robot from an agency against a monthly fee, and the robot will do everything. And robot will also learn your behavior. If he's happy, he fires all his mates, and then he goes to agency and gets a robot. Now, the robot is tireless. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't eat anything. It only consumes some battery power or electricity. And it does whatever he tells to do. And on top of that, he's learning the behavior of the master. So one day, the professor gets up in the morning and yawns. And after that, he says, Anukul is the name of the robot. Anukul, get me a cup of coffee. Okay, so next day, when the robot listens to that the master is getting up and yawning, and he makes a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, and gives it to the master. So master didn't have to ask for it. So he's learning the behavior of the masters, and master did not ask anything from the robot. Robot is actually satisfying the master. So things were going pretty good. He was very happy. He was paying the monthly fee. But the twist comes at the end of the movie. One day he comes and tells Anukul, I can no more afford you. So I'll give you back to the center. And he said, why, master? He said, I lost my job. And then he says, why do you lose your job, master? He said, they put a robot like you in my class, and the robot has learned my content of teaching, my style of teaching. So the college principal has decided, or university decided that I be fired, and they got the robot. So he loses the job. Now, so what was a matter of caution by Satyajit Ray is that now we all are professors in FDP. So I guess it's our professors or would be professors like us. It's a matter of caution that by machine learning, we don't create a software, we don't create an entity that is going to mimic my behavior, and we all become jobless. So what is our challenge as a professor, as a teacher, that we must have something behavioral in our delivery of lectures, in our dealing with students, okay, which no machine learning algorithm can learn. So that is the challenge to our community. We have to evolve certain innovative way of teaching so that the machine will fail to learn. So at one point, we are making the machine to learn our behavior. And one point, on the other hand, to protect ourselves, we have to make sure that we'll have certain ingenuity in our behavior, in our delivering things, so that a robot can hopefully not learn it. So this is a challenge, and we challenge both ways. Train the robot with the machine learning technique, and also at the same time protect ourselves so the robot doesn't replace us. So you must remember this story if you are, and it's a 14 minutes movie, very short movie. And I was amazed to see Ray wrote this story as science fiction 60 years back, maybe even a little more, and which is now so very true. Actually, we can design robots, which we can actually write software programs to imitate our behavior by and large. Okay, I have seen in my own eyes in USA at this university campus, the restaurant delivery boys, they don't have any restaurant delivery boys. So here we just say Domino's pizza or Pizza Hut's pizza, or we have say Swiggy and etc. We just order food and the delivery boy will come and deliver. Now there they don't use this delivery boys or girls. They have robots. So what the robots have been trained in? They've been trained in following the GPS. So if I book some food item in a restaurant and I have to give my address, also the phone number. So what this software does, in general, given any address, the robot, there should be a program which can use the GPS from the restaurant and take that person, that robot to that the apartment or the house where the food has to be delivered. So I've seen robots working on the streets, and they're so well trained, again with some machine learning algorithms, that if there is a red light, they stop. They don't cross the street. Okay, and they go to the house, and it could as well be my apartment is on the 7th floor. So it will go to the elevator. Okay, it will press the button. Elevator will come and the door will open. It will get in, and also it will press the button 7 on that on the elevator, this frame, and it will get off at 7th floor and look for that apartment number. It will reach there, then also put its hand and then buzz it. So you come out, and then on the head there will be a sensor where you have to put your credit card, and the bill is deducted, and then only his body, the belly would, stomach would open, and you can collect the food. And then again the robot will go back the same route. And this I have seen on my own eyes at Purdue University campus. Robots are doing it. So they have trained the robots in using elevators, okay, in buzzing this calling bell, following the GPS navigation to reach that place. Also traffic rule, right? In a red light you should stop, only in a green light you should walk. So it has been trained, and it's all by a computer software, nothing more than that. So I was amazed to see that one. So what machine learning does is basically tries to imitate some habits, some behaviors of human or any other entity, and which could be reproduced over and over. And the other thing the machine learning does is that you have lots of information, or what you call data, try to see whether there is any meaningful information hidden into this data. Now, I'll give an example of what I mean by this meaningful information hidden in the data. Now, I think there are these things they use in the banks pretty well. So they have seen, if you look into all the credit data given by a bank, so it gives somebody 5 lakhs of rupees loan with certain EMI, 2 lakhs of rupees loan, certain EMI, some objective, and so on and so forth. Now the bank is doing business because they earn the interest, and that's what the banks run. But then there will be defaulters. Okay, they can also see that these loans went into a default. That means the EMIs are not being paid regularly. Okay, so if once they have a good number of defaults, then what you call machine learning algorithms, or I would say even a good banker with the intuition, if you look into the data of the persons who have defaulted. So it will depend on people with what purpose, people with how much capital, people with what financial background, people with what kind of job the person is holding, what kind of income inflow to him or her. You look into this, and if you can find a pattern, that's what machine learning algorithm try to find out. If you find a pattern, then next time when the bank gives a loan, okay, it will adopt this one. So if you give a loan application and then try to see whether the features of this application, okay, does resemble with the ones which are defaulted in some sense. Okay, so and then the algorithm will tell that this person is a risky person. So this will trigger, and then the manager has to take a call and probably talk to the person and then make a decision. Ultimately, the decision is taken by the manager, but this application and then evaluating this application on the basis of the past experience of all the applications and their performance, the machine gives some kind of indication. And this is what is done by some machine learning algorithm. So this is one case of machine learning algorithm that we do. Okay, now there has to be some caution. Okay, first maybe I tell you my very favorite story of data and how to use this data. So ultimately, from the available data, you have to extract some meaning out of it. What does this information mean? This relates to Professor Ronald or Professor Sir Ronald Fisher, who is considered to be the father of modern statistics. He was a professor at Cambridge, and this is a very famous tea tasting example. And you know that Indians didn't have the habit of drinking tea at all before British came. The British brought the tea drinking habit to India. So if you go to a British family, a British household, they will greet you with a cup of tea and some cookies. We call it biscuits, they call it cookies. And this is a very standard British practice. And standard practice in Calcutta also. If you come to my house, I'll first greet you with a cup of tea and a couple of biscuits. Now, even 20 years back, tea was always prepared with milk and sugar. Nobody would ask. But now if I go to, I think I was visiting St. Xavier's, and your principal father asked me, Professor Roy, do you take milk or sugar in your tea? I said, well, I prefer no sugar, but maybe milk is fine. Now, these options we didn't have 20 years back. When in Britain, it's 20 years back, the lady won't ask you this option. They will serve you that with tea and coffee. Now only we have all these varieties, tea with sugar, without sugar, with milk, without milk, and all sense of all these combinations. So this story is 100 years old. So, and I would probably say this was the first formal way of coming to methodology to come to some conclusion. So this is what the example I think you enjoy. So Sir Fisher one evening went to his friend's house, and his wife, friend's wife, the lady of the house, offered him a cup of tea and some cookies. And then suddenly a question came to his mind. This are the great people, so great questions come into their mind, which doesn't come to, we observe everything, but we may not have the same question in our mind. So he says, when you make tea, I'll tell the style of British making tea. It's not the Punjabi dhawa tea. Dhawa tea is, they put milk, sugar, and tea leaves, and they boil it. Okay, and then they filter it. So the British style of making tea is, you boil the water in a pot, you put the tea leaves, okay, and then pour the boiling water. Allow it to brew for a few minutes. Some people also add sugar while brewing. So they will put the tea leaf, they'll put the sugar, and then pour the boiling water and allow it to brew. And the argument is that if you put the sugar at this level, it gets mixed up very well, it gets dissolved very well. Now, after filtering, they add sugar, they add milk. Now, some people would not put the sugar while brewing, so they'll just brew the tea leaves, filter it, then along with the milk, they'll also add sugar. So, water boiled and tea leaf brewed on it. Milk is added after filtering. So, the role of sugar. The sugar may be added while brewing or after filtering. There are two options. So, he asked, Madam, when did you put your sugar? Is it while brewing or is it after filtering? And then Madam said, oh no, I always put my sugar after filtering. I don't add sugar while brewing. And Sir Fisher asked, is there any particular reason for it? He said, of course, if you put the sugar while brewing, the tea tastes horrible. And he said, is that so? This means if I give you a cup of tea, you can tell by taking sips whether sugar was added while brewing or after filtering. She said, of course. Then he said, okay, madam, then let's play a game, if you agree. So I have to just validate your belief, or I have to say that your belief is not quite correct. He said, it's not belief, it's truth. Okay, truth. Let's validate your notion of truth. So she thinks that the tea prepared by where you add the sugar after filtering tastes better than tea prepared when sugar added while brewing. That's what she thinks. Okay, now what is the game? He says, madam, you get me 2 pots of teas. In 1 pot of tea, when you make, you add the sugar while brewing. Say this is a type 1. And then in another pot of tea, when you make the tea, you add sugar after filtering, type 2. So type 1 is when you add the sugar while brewing. Type 2 is when you add the sugar after filtering. And you make me 2 pots of such teas. Type 1 and type 2. So she gets it. So Sir Fisher puts on one corner of the table, dining table, the first pot, and one corner of the type 1 tea, and the other corner puts the type 2 tea, 2 pots. Then he says, madam, you give me 10 cups. So she gets 10 cups. So 5 cups at the bottom, Sir Fisher writes 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, puts on this side where type 1 tea is kept. And then he pours tea from this teapot to these 5 cups. So these 5 cups of tea, all of type 1. And on the other 5 cups, at the bottom, he writes 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And he pours the tea from the other pot, which is prepared by type 2. So 5 cups. So this side, 5 cups type 1, this cup, 5 cups type 2. And then what he does, he basically mixes. Okay, now once you randomize and mix it, you don't know which cup is of type 1, which cup is of type 2. Okay, so then he says, madam, now look at these 10 cups, you don't know which cup is of which type of tea. So the game is that you should take each of the cup, 1 cup at a time, take a few sips, and then tell me which is type 1 or type 2. And do it for all the 10 cups. And then say, oh, this is very easy, I will correct all the 10 times. So fine. So what you are telling, if your belief is true, then you will correct all the 10 times. Right? And think of the worst possible case. You have got no capability of distinguishing between these 2 kinds of teas. In that case also, you can tell how many correctly? 5. Isn't it? So I can tell all of them are type 1. And I know I'll be correct 5 times. Or I may even say randomly 1, 2, 1, 2. And I'll be hopefully correct 5 times. So even if you have no capability of distinguishing these 2 kinds of tea, you can tell 5 correctly. So that's no information. And if your belief is correct, then you can tell all the 10 correctly. But say we do statistics, so I give you some allowance of error. So let me assume that even if you tell 9 correctly, I would accept that your belief is true. But if it is less than 9, so what you are telling, if it's true, you should be able to tell 10 correctly. and I give you some error allowance and say, okay, some error I permit. So even if you tell 9 correctly, I'll assume that you have the capability of judging these two kinds of things, and so I declare that your belief is true. Just my belief is the truth. But if you tell less than 9 correctly, you have to tell me, you have to agree or admit that it is only your belief. You cannot really distinguish. Agreed? So, madam agrees. Madam takes one cup and takes 1 or tells 1 or 2, and she could tell only 7 correctly. So what is the conclusion? Madam accepts defeat and tells that yes, I cannot really distinguish. It's only my belief. Now, what does this story tell you? It talks many things about machine learning that we do these days. So, let's say one kind of machine learning where we generate data ourselves. It's not available data, we generate data ourselves. So there is a belief of certain things. And we want to get relevant data. The relevant data is very important. What is the relevant data? For validating certain belief. And then we make a methodology using this data to come to meaningful conclusion about that belief. This is the whole process. So what is interesting, I think Government of India is doing, which is relevant here. Now, there is a government has a belief that demonetization helped in making the economy more digital. That is to start as a belief. Now, this may be true or may not be true. Then if I have to validate this belief that demonetization helped Indian economy become more and more digital, then we have to formulate this problem. Now we start with a belief. We have to see what kind of data we need. Validate or reject this belief. Okay, so maybe one thing you can think of, maybe you can probably get a fund if you get your students. If you know some bank branches, you don't need to know the customer's name, but you can see before demon how many online transactions a customer did, and after demon the customers, what is their use of this online transaction, online payment, online transfer of money, etc. So before demon, after demon, it's natural. So you have to get data of this making payments and etc. through virtual mode or through physical mode, before the demon and after the demon. Okay, and then we have statistical methods of testing whether it has improved, it has changed significantly or not with this pattern. And if it is so, you can validate whether this demonetization was helpful in digital economy. And our finding is that yes, it did to a large extent. After demon, people say people are using more digital or virtual forum. All these things have become very important. Phone pay, Paytm, and even for the banking transactions, paying bills, etc., etc. People are moving slowly towards digitization. And it all started, say, what we call a jhatka. So this demon came as a jhatka, and people turned to be more and more digital. So this belief could be verified easily. Now, this is where you have to generate data. And this method of arriving at a conclusion from the data, this is what I call the learning algorithms. Okay, this is a learning process, algorithms. And these algorithms are mostly at the backdrop is a statistical understanding, but then a really computer science algorithm. So these are statistical algorithms, but it put into a computer software kind of thing. So you have to have a perfect marriage between statistical methods and this computer science, to use this machine learning. Now, how does it help in research in other subjects, in many subjects, this machine learning things? I'll talk about another story in which I was really involved. So maybe first let me go to the background. I talk about the distance. Now, when we talk of distance, now this is the old plane geometry we learned in our early high school. That if I take 2 points, what is the distance? This is, you draw a straight line between the 2 points, and the length of that straight line is the distance between these 2 points. Okay. Now, in plane, it has 2 dimensions, 2 coordinates. If you go to higher order geometry, it has got many coordinates. So maybe 10, 15, 20, 100 coordinates. And still you can have 2 points in that 100 dimensional space. Still the distance becomes the length of the straight line drawn between these 2 points. And we have a mathematical formula. And for those who know mathematics, this is basically you take the coordinate of the other point, subtract the say x1, x2, xn, y1 y, x1 minus y1 whole square, plus x2 minus y2 whole square, plus xn minus y1 whole square, add them up, square root it, that is the distance. And this was defined by Euclid. So we call it Euclidean distance. And this is a notion of distance we have used from our boyhood or from a girlhood of a girl. And this is the only distance we knew about it. But then first came in late 20s or early 30s. The founder of our institution, Indian Statistical Institute, P.C. Mohalanobish. You should know the name, P.C. Mohalanobish. He was the father of the statistical things in India. He came back from Cambridge and became a professional statistician. He created Indian Statistical Institute. And then it's a very simple thing, but the great people gets attracted to certain very simple phenomena. He looked see, that time it was the British came to India through Calcutta, because they defeated Siraj-Dowlah in the War of Plassey, and so it is the British capital also, and lots of these British officers married the native ladies. And even in my childhood, I saw a big community of what we call Anglo-Indian community. So the father was British and the mother was native Indian. So this is, and if you look at them, you can clearly distinguish between native Indian, an Anglo-Indian, and a real British. Well, complexion is one, but there will be other difference in the features also. So this means they are different. And he was talking about the anthropological parameters. So anthropologically speaking, they are different entities. And visually you can see that they are different. Okay. But so there must be a notion of distance. Something like if you look at me and Mr. Roy Thomas, we are not identical people. So the distance, there is some notion of distance between me and you. And if you look into, say possibly, say Rahul Gandhi, okay, with some notion of distance, Rahul Gandhi and I'm closer to Roy Thomas than Rahul Gandhi or Mrs. Indira Gandhi. I'm different. My distance from Mrs. Gandhi is much more than my distance from Roy Thomas. So visually you can feel there is a notion of distance. How do I capture this mathematically? So Mohalanobish defined a distance criteria. So if you look into any object, any element, any plant, any atomic structure, or any human or any living animals, any plant, etc., you think of anything. Now, there is a notion of distance between any two objects. And how does he define? He is trying to see in terms of features. Okay? I can define some features. And he was working with the anthropological data. He looked into anthropometric features, like say the circumference of my skull, okay, length of my nose, okay, the area of my ear, okay, the width of my shoulder, my height, okay, the length of my fingers, the length from my elbow to tip of this one. So you can think of lots of these physical features of a human. This is called anthropometric measures. Then he was trying to see these measures or these features of a native Indian and these features with the Anglo-Indian and the features of a pure British. Do they look different? Can you distinguish them on the basis of these features? Visually we can see, but we can put it mathematically. And now here, it doesn't quite make sense to do an Euclidean distance. The reason he argued that the Euclidean distance gives equal importance to every coordinate or every dimension. Now, you would think, I give this example with the teachers. You know, some of our teachers say, what is the purpose of exam? We will distinguish among the students who is the good ones, what the moderate ones, who are not the good ones. If a teacher gives scores everybody between 95 and 100, you can hardly make that use that data to distinguish among the students. If 96 and 99 are too close to make a inference that, well, this boy is definitely better than this girl. But if a teacher gives a score in a large canvas, say from 50 to 100, then it's easy to distinguish among the students. So he says that the features which have got less variation should get less importance. The features which has got more variation should get more importance, which is a deviation from the Euclid's idea of distance. Every one has equal importance. He said, I have to look into the variation of all the features, and if the variation is more, it should get more importance. If the variation is less, it should get less important. Okay, and then again, if you look into two attributes, like a shoulder, okay, and maybe shoulder to the elbow, if they are highly correlated, then it's not fair to give them this pair, each of them in the pair, equal importance. So what could be done? So if I get a pair with a high correlation between them, then their contribution in the distance should go down. It should be scaled by the correlation. No point giving them equal importance. So these two together speak something, maybe more than one feature. Otherwise, if one feature talks of the other feature, almost 80% cases, we don't give equal importance. Maybe we give one feature 100% importance, other feature 20% importance. So the role of the pairs also is scaled. So he gives a mathematical formula how to handle the variation of each of this one and how to handle this correlation structure between the attributes. And then he gave a formula. Okay, and this is what we call the new distance concept. And he tried to publish it. He sent it to all the international top journals, the 10, 12 of them, and every journal rejected him. He said, oh, this is nonsense proposition, no basis for this kind of arguments. And then he got so frustrated, then he got it published in a very, very lowly placed journal. It's not a journal, it's a bulletin. You heard of Asiatic Society? Asiatic Society publishes every quarterly bulletin. So he published this paper in the Asiatic Society Quarterly Bulletin in 1930s. And now, this is the most cited scientific paper on earth. And Asiatic Society got a big name because they published this work, and it's called Moholy-Nagy distance. So In every machine learning algorithm, when you use distance, okay, everybody uses Molar-Navish distance. So if you want to see whether two species of plant, two species of animal, or any two objects, if you want to see how far they are from each other, how distinct they are, okay, the first thing becomes human intuition. What are the features by which you can distinguish? You study the features, you study the variations, you study the correlations, and then you use the Molar-Navish distance formula. And that's how, and this has become standard practice. And if you are doing machine learning, and the notion of distance that you will be using all through is just going to be this Molar-Navish, we call it a Molar-Navish disk or a Molar-Navish distance. And if anybody is trying to learn machine learning, this is a must. They first understand the notion of Molar-Navish distance. And this is how we are going to distinguish things. And there is no second to it. And I told the story. So this is very important. And in every science we use it, how to distinguish different elements. So features means basically we collect data. Okay, on the basis of data, we try to distinguish between two things. That has become a very standard thing. And how we use this Molar-Navish distance, you'll be surprised. We used this once. We used a machine learning algorithm to count the number of tigers in Sundarban area. You know, this Royal Bengal tigers, they live in the very close to Bay of Bengal in the Sundarban area. And we do a tiger census. Previously, it was done by the footsteps, the pug marks. And now it is done by camera trapping. And where do you put the camera trapping? Normally near the rivulets, because no matter what you do, the tiger will come to drink water. Previously, we used to look at the footsteps, the pug marks near the water bodies. This will leave a trail. If you watch, the tiger will come down to the rivulet to drink water, it will go back. So this is going to keep a trail of the footsteps. Now it will keep a trail of the images, camera trap. So, and this takes from one side only, one shot, one shot, one shot, one shot, and then another shot. Okay, and we collect, if I talk of today's, we take this camera trap, these pictures, the sequence of pictures, and we take the timestamp on it and the physical location of this one. And then what you do, if I know at the same physical location, at the same time point, we got a sequence of images, I know for sure this is from the same tiger. So we have to first understand what are the features that identifies this tiger. Now, the wildlife experts would give you this input. What are the features that kind of defines a tiger? What could you observe from the tiger's picture? Okay, is it the size of the head? Is it the number of the stripes? Is it the length of the tail or the length of the body? Its weight? All these kinds of things. Wildlife experts will tell you what are the features that's going to identify a tiger. Okay, and then one thing we know that if I get at the same physical location, the same time point, a sequence of pictures, I know this from the same tiger. And more or less same time point, physical locations is 100 kilometers apart, then I know for sure this sequence of photos are a different tiger. Using this data, defining those features of a tiger's picture, we can actually study the within variation. That means within same tiger with different feature, different photos, how much it could vary. This measure of variation. And I know that these tigers are different tigers for sure. I can look into what is the level of variation different tigers have with respect to those features. And now the variation between the tigers, it must be much larger than compared to the variation within the tiger. If it is so, then only we can count. So we verified that this is true. And then we applied some machine learning algorithm looking into this thing, and we got the number of tigers. This is a little less than 100. Okay, this is it's actually less than 100 tigers. And people should believe that there are some 250 tigers, but no, it's only about 100. So in this, when counting these tigers, we adopt these machine learning techniques. But at the backdrop, we can understand the domain. So this is, okay, the first thing is very important. I think now I'm trying to give you some solid points. Don't try to use machine learning algorithm without Yeah, I got disconnected, sorry. Okay, so am I audible? Yes, I'm audible. Yeah, okay. So it's my finishing comments now, or the concluding comments. Again, I'll tell a story and then I'll conclude my my talk. This also again goes back to Sir Ronald Fisher, as we consider him to be the father of this modern statistical methods. So there is a notion called correlation coefficient. Now nowadays, every researcher have to learn this notion of correlation coefficient, because otherwise you cannot do research in science at all. You understand this? Some say association, measure of association. You have to understand this association, and one of it measure association is through correlation coefficient. So if there is a formula, so Sir Fisher was teaching in his Cambridge class this association, how to measure, then a different correlation coefficient, he got mathematical formula, and then he proved that it lies between -1 and +1. Positive means if one attribute increases, the other attribute increases. Something like could be height and weight. Usually, if you are taller, your weight is also more. Okay, or I may say that if you have amount of cloud you have, if you have more cloud, the rainfall becomes more and more. And the negative means if one increases, the other decreases. So if you measure the amount of sunshine, there's more sunshine, then naturally the rainfall goes down. So this I say negatively correlated. And other one I say cloud and rainfall positively correlated. Zero means there's no correlation at all. They're kind of independent. And then +1 means, -1 means it exactly determines. If one attribute I know the other attribute for sure. So this is all things he taught in the class. And then he told, okay, boys or girls, you just go to the library. At that time there's no internet. So you just look into the British Quarterly Bulletin. So one group, they divided the class into 2 groups. One group was asked him to look into the bulletin of the Ministry of Commerce of the British government. And they said you just go to the last 120 quarters, the last 30 years. For each quarter, 120 quarters, you should copy down the amount of apple export. That's available in the bulletin of the Ministry of Commerce. So they divide their job, they look into all these 120 bulletins, and they find out this quarter, this much apple export, this quarter, this much apple export, and so on and so forth. And other group was asked to look into the bulletin of the Ministry of Social Welfare and Justice. And they were asked to record the number of registered divorces. So they look into the data and they make data. Quarter-wise number of divorces. Then come back to the class and he writes down. This is the quarter, amount of export, and number of divorces. Likewise, they have got 120 data points. Each data point has 2 coordinates. One is the apple export, one is the number of registered divorces. The numbers. Then he said, boys, girls, I have taught you correlation coefficient. You compute the correlation coefficient for this data. The numbers, put in the formula, something will come out. And what came out is -0.87. Very close to -1. The natural recommendation would be, if you want to decrease the number of divorces, you have to increase the apple export. That's what is minus point, the recommendation. Now this is ridiculous, right? Laughable. Okay, so he said the lesson is that you don't apply any of these algorithms blindly, because you have some data, you have some methods you are developing, some algorithms, you put some data, something will come out. And this, what is coming out, may not make any sense, or it make absolutely nonsense unless you understand the domain completely and well enough to apply all these methods. So my note of caution, if you are thinking of applying these machine learning techniques, try to understand the domain properly, to understand what is the relevant data, and then only apply these machine learning techniques. Don't use it blindly, because in an algorithm, you put some data, something will come out, and that may not make any sense at all. It will be nonsense. So Fisher pointed out, no machine learning was born that time. There is no concept. In 2030, he was talking about the danger of making inference just from the data, without understanding the data. So in this case, we would not apply these machine learning algorithms. Okay, we know that there is no association. You cannot intuitively can feel any association, so don't apply that one. This is my, I also give the same note of caution to all of you. When you use machine learning algorithms, there are plenty of algorithms these days for your domain. You use it to make something out of your data. Okay, some direction, some meaningful inference from your data, but don't do it unless you understand the domain well enough, or deep enough, or good enough. Okay, with this I'll stop.
Sony, you can start question and answer section. Sonia.
Yes. I invite Professor Lydia and Shazia to take over the question answer session. I think Professor Lydia, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So thank you for the session. And there are quite a few interesting questions that have come up. One of the questions is, machine learning comes into which research methodology? Descriptive, exploratory, or experimental?
It's probably mostly exploratory. And also it used to interpret the experimental data.
There's another question by Ms. Ketki. She asks, how is machine learning different from DL? That's deep learning. Is more useful for biology.
Deep learning is just one of the machine learning algorithms. It's a proper subset. Deep learning.
She asks, sorry, sir.
Deep learning is just one of the machine learning algorithms or methods. Machine is a larger class. Deep learning is one of those. There are many algorithms in machine learning. Deep learning is one of those.
She extends a question to ask that which of them is more useful for biological applications?
So there's, as I say, that unless I understand the domain, I cannot really make any useful comment. Once I understand the domain, I can say well, it all depends. So in some cases, deep learning could be more useful. Some case, there could be standard ML algorithms could be more useful than deep learning. Deep learning even might confuse. So it will depend on the domain. So I cannot really make a blanket statement on that.
So often when researchers want to work in the machine learning domain or the deep learning domain, when it comes to proposing their topic, they often have to defend their case when a question is posed to them. How do you know for sure that it is not a pure statistics project? Or how do you know for sure that it is a ML and not a DL?
No, see, the second question is nonsense, because DL is a kind of ML. So if somebody asks this question as a nonsense question, you must object to that. Okay, you may say that of all the ML algorithms, why do you use the DL algorithm? That could be a valid question. Okay, so there are many machine learning algorithms. Why do you use the learning there? So this is Again, I will tell scientifically, there is no proof that DL is going to work better uniformly than other ML methods in all domains. There is no such result. So what people do, they people do exploratory research and see which algorithm fits to their data. And deep learning may fit to their data or may not fit to their data. Some other algorithms could fit their data better. So again, there is no absolute answer on this. But I must it's correct that don't confuse between ML and DL. DL is only one kind of ML. So there is no conflict. But ML has many other algorithms also.
Okay. Sir, another question is, apart from subjects such as economics in humanities, how can machine learning be used as a research tool in other disciplines such as sociology or political science?
Sociology I can. Sociology I can. Even political science I also can. Probably. See, this is if you want to model some behavior. Say, for example, if you want to study certain trait of a certain tribe, okay, you can observe them, okay, and you may possibly see from this behavioral observations what you can conclude about this particular tribe and how these tribes could be helped by even the government to lift them up. So this is, I think, sociology. We are already using it to understand different, for the tribal level, the tribal behaviors. Okay, from this, so we have to observe them close enough, long enough. And political science, this is probably, I won't say political science, but I would say governmental action. This is all machine learning now. But machine learning based on the intuitions framed by the politician.
Okay.
Okay. But it starts from somewhere. Intuition framed by the politicians. So we believe that they probably have stronger intuition than others. They're into politics all the time. So when the government makes a policy, the efficacy of the policy, how the policy is going to work in future, all these things are projected by machine learning algorithms.
Okay, sir. Sir, I would like to add my question also because I'm from political science. So can it be used for estimating the electoral and the voting behavior, the electoral outcomes?
Yes, and theoretically yes, but practically we are much behind in that area.
Okay.
Because I would say, understanding human behavior in terms of election participation is still very difficult. I would not say, suppose I think of your future. Maybe what are you from Mumbai?
Yes.
So a Mumbaiker, a lady of this age group, this economic background, now do all of them behave same? They don't.
No.
Isn't it?
Yes.
So we are trying to model your behavior from your basic features.
Yes.
Now, humans are so distinct. So if I look into all the features I can think of, Mumbaikar, ladies, this age group, this background, this much educated, this finished background, but even then, if I get two persons, they don't think similarly. If they would have, then machine learning would have been used pretty efficiently to make this prediction, understand the poll behaviors. But humans are much more complicated than this. So I don't think we model the human mind that way, and that's why all our efforts to do this, them mostly failure. If it happens, I would say happens by chance.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. Sir, another question is, given the backdrop of 21st century, how would you suggest the faculties of humanities to follow the development of machine learning? If you could kindly guide us about it.
Look, I would first say, talk of my ignorance. I am not too aware of the humanities too much, except some sociology part of it, or I don't know, in anthropology, anthropology is not humanities, sociology. So unless I understand the domain exactly, so you have to understand domain and what you are trying to bring out, two things are very important. Understand the domain and a set of conclusions you'd like to derive from that. Not the exact one, but you must have some way of, some thought process given into it that these are the possible conclusions. And machine learning will bridge from your understand the domain to set a conclusion, which one is probably the most correct conclusion. These two end, I have no expertise. Okay, but once I am briefed about these two ends, then I can possibly, or any ML expert can suggest you methodology to come from this basic domain information to the kind of conclusion you like to draw. But this again depends on the domain. But I'm pretty sure in humanities, these are the basic features. Certain background, certain information, you're trying to conclude something. And machine learning is bridge between these two, how to reach from this end to that end.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Lydia?
So, one source of inspiration before you go for all the young researchers, whenever a researcher thinks of a problem, the next step is he starts going up across the literature review, the survey. So whenever you come across the papers, there is accuracy level quoted over there of 95%, 99%, 98%.
I normally mostly don't trust those results. A overfit is probably more dangerous. I don't know, my experience says these overfits are very dangerous. So you could manipulate your data. So unless you're very honest to give me right data, so you could throw some data. I want all kinds of data to put into it. Okay, then only I can make this thing. So the 95% they take some data set and show what I would like to ask this question to the researchers. The machine learning algorithms are normally some iterative algorithms. Okay. First question I ask them as a scientific point of view: does your algorithm terminate? You do 1 million items and stop. Does it terminate? And when you terminate, can you give an estimate whether how close you are to the optimal situation? Unless you give answer to these two questions, those percentage at their quote is not very meaningful to me. You should ask this question: does the method terminate? When you terminate, how close you are to the most optimal feature? So you're telling basically 95% times I'm doing correct. It's not quite acceptable to me. But researchers have to quote, otherwise your paper doesn't get accepted in the journal. If you say I've got 89% correct, no journal will accept this one. And the other thing is very difficult. If you can show that this one does converge, and I really reach very close to the optimal, I can give a proof or convincing argument, then that is the best thing.
Thank you, sir, for that response. That gives hope that there's still scope for research and research gap in such results.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, Sony, you can.
Yes. Professor Lydia and Professor Shazia, are there any more questions that we would take, or we'll go ahead?
I think we've covered all, ma'am.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Bimal Kumar. I formally invite Professor Lydia Fernandez from the Department of Information Technology to propose the vote of thanks for the session.
Thank you, Soni, ma'am. So we are fortunate to have had you as a resource person for this session of machine learning. Your examples based from your experience have given a new insight to the topic. You've thrown us all a challenge to come up with innovative techniques to overcome machines so that they do not replace us. Challenge well accepted, sir. Your stories interlinking examples of statistics dating back to Ronald Fisher and Muriel Bristol of 1935, along with modern day examples of machine playing the role of delivery boys with underlying ML algorithms, have kept us hooked on to your session. You highlighted how the demons of demon have pushed us to the verge of digitalization. And with this hope of having data at hand, The onus of coming up with novel algorithms of ML plus stats definitely opens up a hope for aspiring researchers. Thank you so much for your time, sir. We are grateful to you.
Pleasure.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Thank you.
Professor Nirmal Roy. Thank you, Professor Lydia.
Yeah, I'm gonna catch a flight to Delhi. So, okay.
Thank you, sir. Safe journey.
Okay. Thank you.
A few instructions to all our esteemed participants that we will be posting 2 separate feedback forms links on the YouTube chat. One for the participants who have registered for the arts and humanities, and the other one for the sciences. Kindly fill up the feedback form before you leave the session. Thank you.